Hello, guys, and welcome. I'll try to help you to relic your brain and fall asleep. Don't forget to leave a like and click on subscribe button to follow more of this kind of videos. Thanks in advance. First story, the broken car. The New Mexico highway unspooled like a strip of carbon paper under a sky the color of bruised silver. I'd been driving since dawn, no cell service for hours, just a cracked windshield and an aging Jeep that had begun to protest in subtle ways, a wheeze here, a rattle there. As dusk fell, the engine gave one final shudder and died, stranding me somewhere between Gallup and nowhere. I coasted to a halt beside an abandoned cattle gate, silence leaking into the cab like gas. That's when I saw it. A service station across the road I swear hadn't been there a second ago. Neon letters buzzed dimly, Mayor's Auto and Fuel. The building looked faded but intact, like it had stepped out of a 1970s Polaroid. I crossed the cracked asphalt and approached, noting how the desert around it seemed to dim unnaturally. Inside, a man stood behind the counter, greasy coveralls, thick glasses, too still. "Need a tow?" he asked without looking up. Yeah, my Jeep died. Just there across the road. Road's been closed for years," he muttered. I turned back to the window, nothing but desert. I laughed awkwardly. "You must be mistaken, I just pulled in. Look, the tire marks are probably still fresh." He finally looked at me, eyes magnified and glinting oddly behind the glasses. They all say that at first. A silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. I shifted uneasily. "Do you have a phone I can use?" The New Mexico highway unspooled like a strip of carbon paper under a sky the color of bruised silver. I'd been driving since dawn, no cell service for hours, just a cracked windshield and an aging Jeep that had begun to protest in subtle ways, a wheeze here, a rattle there. As dusk fell, the engine gave one final shudder and died, stranding me somewhere between Gallup and nowhere. I coasted to a halt beside an abandoned cattle gate, silence leaking into the cab like gas. That's when I saw it. A service station across the road I swear hadn't been there a second ago. Neon letters buzzed dimly, Mayor's Auto and Fuel. The building looked faded but intact, like it had stepped out of a 1970s Polaroid. I crossed the cracked asphalt and approached, noting how the desert around it seemed to dim unnaturally. Inside, a man stood behind the counter, greasy coveralls, thick glasses, too still. "Need a tow?" he asked without looking up. Yeah, my Jeep died. Just there across the road. Road's been closed for years," he muttered. I turned back to the window, nothing but desert. I laughed awkwardly. "You must be mistaken, I just pulled in. Look, the tire marks are probably still fresh." He finally looked at me, eyes magnified and glinting oddly behind the glasses. They all say that at first. A silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. I shifted uneasily. "Do you have a phone I can use?" That was today, and that was me. "What the hell is this?" The lights flickered. The buzzing of the neon grew louder. I looked outside again, hoping to see my Jeep, something, anything to remind me this was still the real world. But the window showed only shifting sand and a rusted sign half buried in a dune that hadn't been there before. The sign read, "Welcome to Myers, last stop you'll ever need." The man's voice took on a more mechanical cadence. "We'll get you sorted soon. Most folks find it easier once they stop fighting it." Fighting what? The walls seemed to breathe around me. The air felt thicker. The station smelled like oil and ozone and something else beneath that, something sweet and rotting. "The loop," he said softly. I dropped the clipboard and backed away, bumping into the doorframe. "I'm leaving. Door won't open anymore," he said, "and not for you, not after you've seen it." I yanked the handle. It didn't move, not even an inch. Outside, a shape was forming in the distance. Another driver, another broken vehicle, another helpful sign that hadn't been there a moment ago. I watched as their silhouette approached the station, The man behind the counter gave me a slow, tired nod. "You're on greeting duty now. Everyone takes a turn." The neon overhead buzzed louder until it became a constant, painful whine. I stepped away from the door and looked back at the man, but he was gone. Only the clipboard remained on the counter, freshly updated with a new name and date beneath mine. The door behind me creaked open. A young woman stepped inside, blinking against the dim light. "My car broke down. I think I need help," she said. I opened my mouth, the words already forming. "Road's been closed for years." Second story, the Blue Road. The desert doesn't echo, it consumes. At 3:08 a.m., the only sound left in the universe was the steady hum of a weathered 2004 Chevy Impala cutting through the black belly of the Mojave. Its engine thrummed like a dying heart, beating just enough to keep itself alive. Miles Donovan gripped the steering wheel like a man clinging to wreckage. Behind him lay Las Vegas, where he'd lost his apartment, his job as a line cook, and most recently, a woman named Alina who had promised forever and meant 3 years. He didn't cry when he left, didn't rage, just drove. The road stretched ahead in a lonely ribbon illuminated by the yellowing beams of his headlights and nothing else. Not another soul in sight unless you counted the pinprick stars overhead. Cold, distant, uninterested in the affairs of men. For hours, nothing changed until it did. At first it was subtle, a dark speck in the rearview mirror, a shape without lights hugging the center of the road. Miles squinted. A truck, a cop car running dark. No, too large and square. An SUV maybe, the kind the military might use in places with names like Kandahar or Tikrit. He pushed the gas slightly. The shape stayed the same distance. He eased off. Yeah, it stayed. "Okay," he muttered. "That's new." He reached for the radio, already expecting static. He got it. Not even a whisper of mariachi from the border or Christian talk radio from Utah. Just a hiss, like something breathing too close to the mic. He tried his phone. No service, not even an emergency SOS. Just a blank gray icon and a mocking battery percentage. Yet when the semi appeared ahead of him in the slow lane, Miles signaled and began to brake gently to pass. That's when the dashboard changed. The speedometer vanished. In its place, glowing blue numbers, coordinates, numbers that flickered and blinked like Morse code. 30.974 dig and 116.748 degu. And then 3 seconds later, the normal readout snapped back into place like nothing had happened. He blinked, leaned in. What the hell? He looked back. The SUV had halved the distance, close enough now for him to see its shape clearly. A matte green Suburban with no plates. The windows reflected nothing, not the moonlight, not his headlights. He pressed harder on the gas. The Suburban matched. His pulse began to sync with the thrum of the tires, faster and faster. The tachometer needle crept toward 2800 RM when something new appeared, a thin blue line just beneath the red zone. It pulsed gently, rhythmically, almost inviting. Then the landscape changed. He couldn't say how. Not exactly, but the desert around him, the dead scrub, the scattered Joshua trees, they no longer sat upright. They leaned inward, toward the road, like spectators gathering for a show they'd waited centuries to see. He rolled down the window. The wind carried a strange scent, metallic and like blood spilled on a hot engine. Then came the sign, "Blue Road, next right authorized, travelers only." There was no ramp, just empty desert to either side. Except he saw it, just for a moment, a thin, pale scar branching off the highway, a road that hadn't been there a moment before. He tapped the brakes again. The dashboard erupted in blue light. 411 degrees and 116.823 degrees. The Suburban behind him inched closer. It was no longer just following, it was ushering him. Miles gritted his teeth and kept going. The next sign arrived 5 minutes later. Blue Road, 1 mile. This time the turnoff was unmistakable. A perfect arc of new pavement branching off into a place the desert had forgotten. No mile markers, no painted lines. Just asphalt that shimmered faintly as if moonlit from within. His steering wheel tugged rightward, not violently, but insistently, as if the car itself wanted to follow. The Suburban followed too, and behind it something new. A second vehicle, boxy, rusted, an old RV perhaps, or an armored van, no lights, no markings, just another shadow in a growing convoy. He passed the third sign, Blue Road next, right, last chance. This time the road was obvious and terrifying. The landscape beyond it was no longer desert. It shimmered, glowed, moved. The grass was too tall, the buildings too vague, as if the world itself hadn't quite rendered all the way. His RPM hit 2,847. The blue line on the tachometer pulsed faster. He didn't remember turning, but suddenly he was on it. The Blue Road. The pavement changed color under his tires from black to navy to a radiant cerulean that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. The rearview mirror revealed a caravan of impossible vehicles, a horse-drawn hearse, a sports car split down the middle by rust, a school bus with no windows, no doors. All of them followed, all of them silent, all of them driven by figures that barely moved. He saw the driver of the Suburban, not a man, not really. A figure molded from shadow, wearing the shape of a man like a coat, where eyes should have been. Good night.